I'm going to show how to review an open pull request for an extracted file. So the instructions here are pretty light. Review files according to the review guidelines and request changes or merge. And when it's done, to drag the task to the data passes visual inspection column in the project board. So you can find open pull requests on the pull requests tab of the data extraction repository, and clearly we've got quite a lot of work to do. I am working from the project board, and I've pulled up a few free state tasks that haven't been merged yet, because that is quite a high priority right now. So I want to focus on those instead of going just from the project board. Let's just have a quick look at the review guidelines. So the review guidelines are to open up the original PDF for comparison and spot checks, to check if the CSV captures all the data. If there's another file, just that's fine. That can be split into files. Just make sure that the pull request, if it suggests that it's covering the entire PDF, then a pull request should cover an entire PDF and not just one file. Is the data in the correct column? But it's fine if multiple pull requests have been made. It's just that one issue corresponds to one file. So you don't want to end up with closing an issue thinking it's done, but actually there's other files for which there weren't pull requests, and thus they get forgotten. Okay, is the data in the correct column? Sometimes rows get shifted with tabular or with extracting tables, and is each record one supplier, one buyer, and one order amount, or are there some mistakes? And then generally, I think you really need to be aware of these typical pitfalls, like merged cells that should have been split and folded down, and when things have been split that should actually be on the same row, and so on. So have a read through these. There are some examples that can help. Okay, so let's take a look at one pull request. Here is a let's take I think I've opened cooperative governance and traditional affairs. So this is the issue, which has the source URL. We're going to need a trusted archive copy later, so we'll take care of that when we do that. And the pull request link is here, so this issue was mentioned in the pull request, so we can find the pull request for that. Here I've opened up the file to be able to quickly compare the pull request and the original file, and this is the pull request. No, this is not the pull request. Let's open up that pull request. Okay, so here's the pull request, and I can already see there's a note, had to clone data in cells in the first and last 3 columns, as there are merged Excel cells, which we can see in that original file. So these cells are merged, but there's individual price rows, which means we can actually repeat these and have individual records for each of these items to have slightly more granular data. And here's also merged cells, so each of these need to be repeated for each row, because there's a total order amount column, and there's a individual row for each of these items. So for that reason, this must occur for each row of those, and the supplier name as well. Okay, so now I want to look at the pull request and see that it represents the data in the table correctly. So this isn't particularly helpful, but most of the time it works to click on view file here. And then I can see the department, the reporting period, all of these columns. I can scroll to the right to see more data. So the key things I want to look at in the pull request are were the columns extracted correctly, so department, reporting period, and so on. And on the far right, does that look all right? And if I scroll, so it looks right here. And if I scroll to the right, that looks good as well. Next thing I want to look at is if I've got all the rows. So I've got 20 rows here. The last row is Sechabelo. And let's have a look here. The last row I've got here is Sechabelo. So there's a couple of blank rows here, which is fine. So it looks like all the blanks are excluded from this data set, which is quite handy. They're not needed. And also the subtotal row is excluded, and that's fine as well. Now we want to make sure that these cells are filled down correctly. So we've got that Onta and Tubbs Enterprise, Onta and Tubbs Enterprise, and that goes down. The last item is liquid soap. The next soap supplier supplied gloves. So then I would just go Onta and Tubbs liquid soap. The next supplier supplied gloves. So that looks like everything is in order. And that means I go to the pull request. I go back to the pull request. I click on conversation. And then I just click merge pull request. And then I go back to the project, and that was Cogta. So I'm going to drag this to DataPass's visual inspection. And that's about everything for a pull request. I want to show one example where I did request some changes. So in this case, we also had some of these blank cells, which weren't actually filled down, but they corresponded to each individual amount in the same way. And so I just asked for the supplier name to be filled, and they did that and provided an updated screenshot, which was super helpful. So I'm going to review this one quickly as well. So this is Free State Sports, Arts and Culture, and I don't need to open that file. I can just look at here. So that's it's a bit hard to read, but it's fine. Having a look at their pull request. I think I will actually open up the file just to check a bit more closely. Okay, so first one is Indilisa Holdings, which looks fine. 3 rows of that, no, only 2 rows of that. And that's what the data says here as well. This goes down to Tsireletso Shek Consulting disposal bin kit, which is the same we've got here. So it looks like everything's been extracted fine. And just glancing at the data, that looks right as well. So then we can go back to the pull request. And merge that. So Free State Sports, Arts and Culture. can now also be dragged to Dataparse Visual Inspection. And then the next task is to import it and to do all the bits. So before we can do this task 6, import the file, we need to ensure that the columns are named correctly, ensure the files are in their correct locations, and do any data cleaning that's needed for the import.